And I'm a creativity consultant and founder of my own design consultancy firm, Deduce Designs. And today I'll be sort of chatting with you all a little bit about my own experience in information sciences, specifically my background as a data scientist as well as a user experience researcher and designer. I'll be answering some of your questions about the fields and talking a little bit about my own experience and sort of where I see the fields going. So just as some background, I want to greet all of the information science students in Professor Ammari's graduate and undergraduate classes at Rutgers. It's because of your questions that we're doing these talks in the first place. My plan here is to record one continuous talk that I'll then break up into smaller sections for those of you who want to skip around. And specifically, I'll be going into kind of my background and how I got into the information sciences. I'll be giving specific career advice for those information science students who are interested in data science and user experience design. And then kind of more lastly, I'll be giving some general life advice about the discipline of information sciences, and how to kind of think about your early career and ways to get started. And hopefully some other nuggets of wisdom sort of scattered along the way. And hopefully there's something in here that's helpful. If in any one of these videos I didn't specifically answer a question that you had, please feel free to respond in the comments. I'll be following these videos. I'm happy to offer any advice or perspective that I uniquely have. So on to the next question. What advice would you give to someone starting out in data science or user experience? I just want to say, as a student in these subjects, it can always, especially when you're learning a lot of new things, it can always feel sort of off-putting, like you don't have the right skills or you don't, you just haven't had enough practice yet. I really want to assuage any concerns that you have, that you're like just starting out and this stuff is new. And so that's why it's challenging. But just like learning at any age of your life, with enough practice over time, you'll start to feel more comfortable. You'll start to understand sort of the boundaries and the limits of what you're capable of, and you'll know where you can press and stretch. So, your questions are absolutely 100% valid, and I really get where they're coming from. I felt them too myself, absolutely 100%. And just know this too shall pass. Like, you will have had enough experience over time that you will not need to worry so much about this stuff. But on to the specifics of your questions. I'm going to break this part of my talk, into two sections, one directed at the folks who are considering data science, and then one section directed at the UXers. But I really want to impart upon you that there's a tremendous amount of overlap here between the types of advice that I'll give, and I think there might be a lot of value in you watching the sections for the students of the other discipline. I think there's a lot to be gained in terms of understanding how these two work in concert with one another within organizations. But then also, I think you are all facing similar types of challenges, and that the advice that I'm sharing with one group really applies to the other as well. So, and again, as with everything, this is just my perspective, so take what you like and leave the rest. So understandably, there were a lot of questions from the group about like what skills are necessary to get jobs in data science. And before I answer the question of what skills are necessary to find gainful employment, I'm going to say what any good designer says at the start of any interaction, which is, it depends. And first, let's get clear that data science encompasses a lot of different potential roles. I'm going to be pasting the link from this article by Stephen Geringer's Venn diagram, as well as some other Venn diagrams about data science in the description below. What are you good at? What do you enjoy? What parts of the field or the discipline do you gravitate more towards? As you can see, it's actually quite rare for someone to be good at all the areas of data science. In some ways, these various areas, the sort of more technical side, the more math side, and then the subject matter expertise, like they're all pulling in opposite directions to a certain degree. And to try to find that complete perfect synergy of all of them has the potential for crazy making. So some of you had questions about, worried you're not strong enough in math or that you're not strong enough in programming. And, again, this is my humble opinion, but a lot of data science and frankly good and interesting work can be boiled down to making fancy charts in Excel and using macros. This is like the dirty little secret of data science and that no one really wants to talk about. Much like user experience isn't all about visual design, most of the people who will be consuming the products of your work and data science will need you to be able to make better sense of what the data is telling them or how to evaluate it. Yes, there are some jobs that are super hardcore machine learning, artificial intelligence, predictive models, sexy, da 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 da. First off, those are not necessarily everyone has access to those jobs. Not everyone has access to them, especially directly out of school. There are some misconceptions about those types of jobs too, and what you can do with predictive modeling. These are areas that are still sort of the definitions and boundaries are still trying to be understood. And we know that there's already opportunity, a lot of rife opportunity for these algorithms to be misapplied. Say, for example, the trouble that Amazon got in where they were trying to identify people from facial records for the police, and they were misidentifying African-American people. I just want to say that there's a complexity here to that type of data science that I think we all, as information scientists and professionals, need to be have a healthy level of skepticism about. So appreciating and understanding the value of a well-built line graph for a business analyst presentation, for example, can't be underexpressed. Because this is something that the majority of your future audiences, whether they're in the C-suite or whether they're just your colleagues in your office, they'll need something to help them understand the underlying numbers in the data sets. Surprisingly, a good average and a mean and standard deviation can be really helpful in expressing that. And, just to kind of hammer that point a little bit more, I saw it a lot when I volunteered both at the organizations in India when I was doing the monitoring and evaluation internships, but then also when I volunteered with DataKind and helped found the A2 Data Dive, that some of the most helpful data science work we could provide to some of these nonprofits was creating a chart for them, was cleaning up the data of their constituent groups, or was helping them make sense of some large data table that they'd been collecting but they'd never used before. And in seeing how valuable just simply cleaning up an Excel spreadsheet could be. It's weird to say this, but it was really rewarding to see all these skills that I developed, when simply applied to some simple questions could yield enormous benefits to certain communities who are looking for this type of help because that's just not their wheelhouse. I would prefer if the administrators of a nonprofit was much better equipped to answer the social questions of the day, like homelessness or child hunger or education, than needing to understand how to make an Excel macro to calculate that. I'm happy to provide that service. Honestly, I feel like we need more people who are willing to make data science and data literacy accessible. But that's a whole nother digression there. So just sort of keep this in mind as some backdrop framing when you're thinking about oh, do I have the right skills? Am I good enough? I think there are a lot of organizations that would really benefit from anyone who has the data literacy necessary to make sense of really complex data sets. So don't undersell yourself. You could be doing a lot of good. And that said, you need to understand the range of skills within the discipline to be competent about speaking about it, right? So take that statistics class, take the programming class, and make mistakes. Well, first off, school is probably the best time to make mistakes. It's much easier to recover from making a mistake in a class project than it is out in the real world. But the added benefits of any mistakes you make while you're in school is that you can learn about what you liked and what you didn't like while developing kind of an appreciation for the range of skills within the discipline. To be able to have respect for statisticians, to be able to have respect to hardcore programmers will help you be more conversant with them when you encounter them in the real world and be able to hold your own. Whereas if you shy away from something that you find challenging without really bothering to get to understand it better, it will probably be something that causes walls for you in your professional development going forward. Curiosity here is a real key to help you overcome challenges of areas of the discipline where you maybe feel less capable at this time. So for now, 2 pieces of advice I would give to those of you who are feeling a little bit nervous about your data science skills are to think first, lean into the aspects of data science that you enjoy most. Maybe you love qualitative research. Maybe you love creating spreadsheets. Just you do you. Take this time in school to sample all of the different skills and work out not just what maybe you're good at doing, right? But what do you actually enjoy? What is the thing that you can honestly see yourself doing day in and day out and continue to find pleasure from? And, I say this because I've worked on a number of different teams in my professional career. And some of the teams that I found the strongest were with individuals who really understood what drove them or like what they were really excited about. So in one team, I had one friend who was like a fantastic visual designer. I had another friend who was a phenomenal UI developer. I brought in the data science user research background. And then we had another friend who loved project managing. And our forces combined, each one of us had a tremendous amount of respect for what the other was contributing. But you could also see that each one of us really loved the roles and the work that we were providing to that team. Not only because we could see how each other's work was being appreciated, but also I like doing the research, and my friend loved building UIs. He loved trying to find new tricks for it. So take the time in school to really lean into what it is that you enjoy doing. Use this time in school to kind of work that out. The next piece of advice I have, or maybe sort of in tandem with the first, is to get as much practical experience applying skills in situations that are sort of like lower risk stakes. So this means maybe finding an internship while you're at school, although that can be somewhat challenging. You could also volunteer with DataKind's Data Corps. I'll paste the description below. They have branches all over the world. Or possibly offer to do an internship project for a local nonprofit who you admire or want to support. Volunteering, obviously, these are real world practical examples, will provide you with work experience. You have to take that very seriously. Another option, which frankly is my favorite option of all of them, is beat the absolute snot out of your group projects during school. And what do I mean by this? Is that instead of just shooting to pass the class or get an A, it's take it to the limit that you can take it. And why do I say this? Well, because it's in these class projects where you get to press the edges on the skills that you've learned in class. And if you're just aiming to do what's necessary to pass the grade, that's cool and all. But what if your big bet pays off? What if that class project to make an interactive map or something like that then turns into the next best app in the Apple Store or something like that? Use the projects, and especially the group work in particular, because usually this tend to be kind of larger type projects. Find a team, find people you enjoy working with, practice this collaboration style, and test your limits. You have no idea what you're capable of, and so why not practice in class? And yes, it's true, going big or going home, could lead to some disastrous results. But in my mind, any professor that's worth their salt will take a look at you pushing the edges on something, the boundaries on something. And as long as you can demonstrate what you learned from that process, well, we bit off more than we could chew, we didn't understand this, or we learned that this data set requires this type of manipulation, or we learned this code base can only be applied to these types of circumstances. Whatever it is, you will have learned something that I guarantee you will come up later in your working life. I also have some more general career advice for information professionals in a little bit, we'll get to that, but now on to the UXers in the group. As I said before, there may be some overlap with the advice that I'm going to provide for you that I also gave with the data science folks. So it might be worth watching both sections, because I think there's a lot that you both can learn from one another. So this Venn diagram from App Inventive is a little bit more focused on functional roles, but I think it highlights some of the important aspects of how user experience design and information professionals work in general within organizations. And look, when I clean it up a bit, you can even see where the data scientists are hanging out. So to answer the question, does visual design or programming experience matter if you want to be in user experience? And as I said previously, it depends. What are you most interested in? What are you drawn to? We have kind of this spectrum of UX roles, right, which I've outlined kind of from user experience through to interaction and visual design, all the way up to UI development, right? And I think that people can like blur the lines between all of them. I know I myself kind of touch upon a lot of different aspects of these roles, but again, don't think of it as you have to understand the entirety. You have to be good at absolutely everything in order to find a job. You will be a stronger candidate if you understand what it is that you enjoy the most and what you're good at. And then again, like I said, lean into that area and understand kind of the limits of that part of the spectrum. Again, going back to sort of a description more of my experience, right? I started as a data scientist who then sort of meandered into user experience design. And when I came in that direction, I was a hardcore user researcher. Right, I'd been working in India at nonprofits, doing monitoring and evaluation, and I was really concerned with this question of quantitative versus qualitative data. And the user research department was the one who was really exploring the reaches of what we could learn from qualitative data and why qualitative data mattered and how to transform qualitative data into quantitative data, how to make sense of it and then apply it to solving problems. That was my gateway drug, user research. I really, honestly, personally think that having a good understanding of user research will make you a strong user experience designer wherever you end up on the spectrum, because user research is so dependent upon understanding of the human psychology and the behavioral decision-making of your users. And so whether you're an interaction designer, whether you're a visual designer, whether you're a UI developer, having an understanding the nuances of how and why your particular user group finds certain tools and features more helpful or not, having that understanding will make you stronger no matter what you do. I started with user research, and then because of my interest in data science, I was slowly but surely getting pulled into interaction design because I was really interested in how to make sense of large and complex sets of data and data information. So like I said, I sort of fell into information visualization, specifically interactive ones, to help create better data literacy around really complex data sets. Again, user experience, just like data science, there are a lot of different touch points that you can fall into, and use this time at school to explore, to test out ideas, to become well-versed in the whole range of skills offered by the discipline. Not because you're going to be a great UI developer, or because you want to be a visual designer, or because you want to be a researcher, but because being conversant in those skills will then allow you in a professional setting to be able to talk to your colleagues intelligibly. I know about visual design. I am capable of doing visual design, but I also know it's not my strength. And so I don't bill myself as a visual designer. However, I am a strong user researcher, and I would be happy to evaluate your visual design with real live users. And I can, as a consequence of my understanding of visual design, help make better questions, better evaluations of a visual design, for example. Again, like I said with the data science students, there's a lot of value in being in school right now and kind of touching and dabbing and getting exposure to all the various aspects of the discipline. But then lean into what you're good at, and really start exploring the edges of what interests you, and use your class projects, use the things that you're learning, use experiences inside and outside of school, right? So either your class projects or maybe volunteering opportunities that you offer into the community nearby the school to continue to practice those skills. My number one thought on the concerns around, do I have the right skills, is you do. You're in a degree. You're doing a great job. You're going to be awesome. It's just going to require practice to feel confident in those skills. What better way to build confidence than to get practice inside and outside of the classroom while you're still at school, while the stakes are still relatively low, and where your mistakes can be real assets to you when you go out on the job market and try to explain how you understand and have recovered or learned from mistakes that you made. That makes you a much more interesting candidate. And speaking of being a job candidate, we're going to transition into kind of some more general career advice for information science students in whole. It bears repeating for all students, whether they're information science or not, that you should really play to your strengths. I can't say this enough. When I was in my graduate program, they had us take up one of those personality quizzes. It was called Strength Finders then. It's now called Clifton Strengths now, and I'll add a link in the description. But the purpose of this assessment was to help us identify those skills we had sort of a natural affinity for. It wasn't saying that these were the only skills we had. It was just saying that of the range of possible skills that we've developed as adults, these are some that I gravitate towards. And why does this matter? Well, this matters because these are the things that I am already good at providing. Like I mentioned sort of a little bit earlier in this talk, some of the best teams in work or otherwise that I've been a part of have been teams where each individual was bringing different strengths to the table. Maybe we had one team member that was great at presentations. We had another team member that was phenomenal at creating the visual presentation. We had another team member that was really good at doing research, whatever it was. And it's those strengths combined that actually make an overall stronger team, especially because these strengths that get identified are usually things that you actually enjoy doing as well. That is where I think this doesn't get played up enough in our educational system. We kind of treat everyone as if you should be good at everything in all the same ways. And it's like, well, that's not actually really kind of how we work. And more importantly, by trying to force myself to be good at something that I don't actually enjoy, I'm actually kind of putting a lot of pressure and sort of doing a lot of harm to my self-confidence because I keep beating my head over and over again in something that I'm just really not inclined towards. However, by identifying the things that I'm naturally good at, I can position myself within teams to say, this is what I can offer. Not only willingly but I'm gladly offering this because I'm good at it and I like doing it. Thinking of identifying your core strengths, what you bring to the table. Yes, take the assessment. That might be a good way of finding it, but then also use the time in school to sort of explore. This is really your time to see what works for you and importantly to step into the things that you're good at. And I'm saying this because I remember what it was like to be a student. I remember that feeling of how am I ever going to get a job? How am I going to live up to this job description? What if I don't have the right skills? What if the job that I want, I'm not prepared for? I have to be good at everything because heaven forbid, they ask me a question and I'm not able to answer it, blah, blah, blah. I remember that terror of oh my God, I've got so much debt. How am I ever going to pay it off? And how am I going to get a job? You're going to get a job. You're going to do great. It's just not going to happen in a linear fashion. It's not going to happen exactly the way you expected, but a way that you can really serve yourself and hopefully lower the anxiety level a little bit is to really use this time to explore and kind of nail down what you really like doing and why you like doing it and really playing into that. And, I can hear you saying, okay, Nikki, that's some pretty generic advice. How does that actually help me get a job? So I'll give you an anecdote to help explain myself in a better way. In my various roles, I've done hiring for the teams, whether it was in economics, data science, computer science, all the rest of it. I kind of have walked around the block on this stuff. But I have this very distinct memory one time of going to an undergraduate engineering career fair. I was hiring for a computer science company. We were taking undergraduates for all level of positions, summer internships, first-time roles. And I was there as a hiring manager. I have a certain amount of roles available. There are certain groups within the organization that are looking for people. And each one of those groups is maybe looking for certain types of skills. Since it was a software company, there's like a base level of like, you have an understanding of how to develop software, right? Like that seemed kind of logical. But beyond that, there were different skill sets within the organization. We had some folks that were developing user interfaces. We had other folks that were maintaining databases. We had other folks who were literally in the kernel of the computer working at sort of base machine code in order to like optimize the performance of our software. And someone that likes working at the kernel is not going to be happy in a user interface group, and vice versa. While I was there to evaluate the students to see whether or not they'd be a good fit for the organization, it was important for me to also understand like what types of things they wanted to do in their roles, like what did they have affinity for. I assumed, and I could assume, that because they were computer science students, they had sort of a broad exposure to a lot of different aspects of computer science. But like where in the hierarchy of the machine were they most interested in spending time? So anyway, I'm at this career fair, and I am not kidding you. Someone had coached this group of sophomores because every single one of them handed me a resume that looked near identical, like almost down to the font and the formatting. Same resume, and the way they presented themselves was exactly the same. It was like, hello, my name is, I'm a sophomore here, and I study computer science, and I love working in machine languages. And they rattled off literally verbatim, almost the same statement. And as a recruiter, this made my job almost impossible because there was nothing to distinguish them. I mean, maybe a grade point here or there, but like that doesn't tell me anything about them or where they would thrive, right? Like maybe I'm hiring somebody who's like super smart, but they actually prefer working in the kernel, but I sent them to the UI department. They're going to be miserable. And maybe they'll make do, maybe they're smart enough to figure it out, but like that's not everyone can get put into a department where they don't really feel like a good fit and make sense of it because it's not maybe playing to their strength. The students that stood out in that, and I can say they literally stood out because they were the only ones who were different, were the ones who, when I would ask questions like, so what do you do outside of school? Or did you participate in any clubs or activities that let me know a little bit more about what types of things you're interested in? These are students that would tell me about hackathon projects that they participated in, or maybe side projects they were building, or maybe research with a professor that they were participating in or acting as research assistants for. Everyone's from your class they're taking basically the same courses, right? So there's a grade way, I could use the grades to evaluate you, but that doesn't tell me who you are or what excites you about this discipline or like where within an organization I would put you in order to light you up. I apologize. I was a student. I remember feeling this way. So if this isn't your experience, I sincerely apologize. But I remember feeling like I have to prove to them that I'm the right person for the job and that I can do anything they ask me to. And that's actually not really true as someone coming right out of school. You can't do anything that they ask. You might not have the experience or the skills. So trying to be everything to anyone means that you're really nothing to no one. If you can instead focus on what you enjoy and what you're good at, you can really use that as an opportunity to stand out and shine. And that can be terrifying. Even as like a, nearly 40-year-old, like it is terrifying to self-identify with like what I'm good at because, what if I'm not a good fit? What if they don't like me? And that's a very natural and logical response. But the irony is, and what I feel like I've learned over time is that by not self-identifying about what I'm good at and where I excel, I actually make it a lot harder for people to find the right fit for me. My advice to you is to really use this time in school to build that sense of who you are and what you're good at. And know that, like, when you get out into the real world, you'll get a lot more practice and things will kind of start to make more sense as you're in the world of it. Just trust that understanding your strengths and then presenting your strengths to potential employers will help you find a good fit, right? Will help you find the organization that you should be a part of, as opposed to like, I'm going to work in big tech. I'm going to work for the biggest, best, tech company ever. They're going to think I'm awesome. Okay, cool. That cool. If that's what you're striving for. I was at one point striving for that too. And then I found sort of along the way that, like, I didn't fit in those cultures or their communities, or the group think that they were asking me to participate in didn't match me. And the more I tried to conform to being what someone else wanted me to be, the less I felt like I fit. So find your fit. It's good. It's going to be very exciting. And I wish you the best of luck on that. So to kind of sum up the career advice here, keep in mind that where you end up in your career, what role you decide to apply for, really depends on what your interests are. Developing that understanding can really be furthered by understanding what you're good at, what you like doing, what lights you up. That said, use this time in school to really understand and discover kind of the breadth of the skills within the discipline and being conversant in those domains. Keep aware of the fact that as you go out into the real world, you're going to have to understand the needs of your audience. So whether your audience is like economists at the New York Fed, or whether they're business analysts within the C-suite of your organization, understanding what their needs are and speaking to their data literacy level is going to be an important part of your role as an information science professional. Use this time in school to get practical experience in the skills that you want to develop, and use your group projects and volunteering opportunities, maybe even hackathons at your school as an opportunity to really press your skills. Worst case scenario, it's a flop, but there's always that chance that if you tried to go big, that it might work out. And where that could lead you, well, who knows, It might lead you to the next best thing. Remember to be yourself in the interview process. Make your interests really clear and known to the representative, because that will help them understand where you might be a good fit. And I didn't touch upon this more directly, but find mentors in the profession who you want to follow. I mean, these are people whose skills you respect, or whose thought leadership you respect, and reach out to them, ask them questions. The questions that I receive from this group, are very understandable given where you are, but in a lot of ways, mentorship is the kind of thing where you want to be asking questions, or rather you want to be thinking of this as a person who's a friendship you want to develop. Like when you're going out to meet your friends or learn about new friends in your life, what are the types of questions that you ask? You really want to get into these people's brains, because that's where the information exchange happens, right? And sharing about your understanding of the world and the perspective that you have can also, potentially be helpful for them as well. So go out there, remember to ask lots of questions, be curious, but it's that curiosity which will help you move forward. Thank you so much for following me along this video so far. If you're interested in hearing more about my professional background, you can just refer to part 1 of the series. And if you're interested in hearing more about my thoughts on the field of information science and how information science professionals can think about their life and their career outside of school, head over to part 3. Look forward to seeing you there. And with that, I just want to say a big, giant thank you to all the students in Professor Ammari's classes for your questions. They were wonderful and insightful, and a great opportunity for me to look back and think on my own experiences and reflect on some of the lessons I've learned. Please feel free to drop me any comments, questions you have. I'd love to hear from you, especially as you go on into your careers. I look forward to hearing more about your adventures.